Welcome to No Name, where the quiet places in America tell stories that were never meant to be heard. Out here, under the same stars that guided pioneers and lost wanderers alike, strange things wait beyond the glow of your campfire. Every week, we share the stories of those who travel deep into the wilderness and discover that the wild has a memory of its own. So before tonight's tale begins, make sure you're somewhere safe. Turn off the lights. And remember, some recordings never stop playing. This is the trail camera captured something behind us, but we were the only hikers that day. I used to believe the forest would always protect me, that its quiet was sacred, a kind of promise between those who watched over it and those who merely passed through. But now, when I hear the wind move through the trees, I don't hear peace anymore. I hear memory. I hear the sound of something that was once breathing right behind me, something I didn't want to admit was real. My name isn't important anymore. I've worn the same green uniform for 15 years. I work out of the San Juan National Forest in southwestern Colorado, a place that still feels untamed, even after a century of trails and rangers and posted warnings. The tourists come for the aspens, for the rivers that look like spilled glass, for that illusion of safety that nature sometimes gives you before it takes everything away. For me, it wasn't a love of nature that brought me here. It was escape. The city had felt too loud, too watched. My father used to say, if you ever need to find yourself, go where no one knows your name. So I did. I came here, and for a while it worked. Out here, the air tasted like rain and pine needles, and the nights stretched wide enough to hold whatever I didn't want to face. But that was before the season we found the footprints, before the trail cameras started picking up things that shouldn't have been there. Before I realized that some silences in the forest don't come from peace. They come from something listening. It started as a maintenance call. A group of missing trail cameras along a section of backcountry trail known as Elks Pass. It's not open to the public that time of year. Avalanche danger, unstable terrain. But 2 hikers had gone missing nearby the previous winter, and our district office wanted to get those cameras back online in case the spring brought remains. I volunteered. The assignment was simple: retrieve, replace, and log. I asked a junior ranger named Mason to come along, new kid, barely 24, with the kind of optimism you only have before the forest starts showing you its teeth. We loaded up our packs, snowshoes, and one of those newer thermal trail cameras that can pick up heat signatures from nearly a mile away. Mason joked it was overkill. What are we expecting to see out there? What are we expecting to see out there? He laughed. Bigfoot? I didn't laugh, because 2 months earlier, one of our older cameras, the kind that triggers only when something moves in front of it, had captured something strange. Just a blur, tall and broad, standing far back between 2 trees. When we enhanced the frame, there was a shape that didn't fit. Too tall to be a man, too thin for a bear, and wrong in posture. Almost as if it was standing upright but leaning forward, like it was listening. We'd all dismissed it, of course. The lens could have been warped from the cold, snow distortion. But deep down, it unsettled me. The angle, the way it stood half in shadow, half in light, reminded me of something you see in the corner of your eye when you're alone, something you don't talk about, because naming it might make it real. We hiked out just after dawn. The forest was still slick with frost, the air so cold that our breath looked like smoke rising from some unseen fire. Mason hummed as we climbed. I didn't. It's funny how quiet can weigh on you after a while. You think you crave it, but then it starts pressing against your chest, filling every pause between your footsteps until it feels alive, watching, almost breathing with you. Around noon, we reached the first camera. It was gone, torn clean off the tree, as if ripped rather than unscrewed. The bark around the mounting spot was shredded, stripped down to pale wood. Mason crouched down, running his gloved fingers along the marks. Bear. Maybe? But bears don't tear metal housings into 2. He looked at me. I looked at the ground. No claw marks, no tracks, just snow that had melted in uneven patches, like something had stood there for a long time, heavy enough to press the frost into the dirt. We replaced the camera and moved deeper in. By mid-afternoon, clouds began to crawl over the ridgeline, the kind that promise a quick storm. We decided to stop and check another camera before turning back. This one, at least, was still there. It hung crooked, though, like something had brushed against it. I unscrewed the casing, swapped the memory card, and slipped it into my pocket. "Let's pull the footage tonight," I said. No sense hiking in darkness. But the forest had other plans. The temperature dropped faster than I expected. Snow began falling in thin, whispering flakes that didn't even look real at first, more like ash. We pushed on, trying to beat the weather, when Mason suddenly stopped. "You hear that?" I turned. "Hear what?" He cocked his head, eyes narrowing. "Like a whistle." I strained my ears. Nothing, just the wind moving through the trees. But then faintly I heard it too. A single drawn-out note, low and hollow, echoing from somewhere up the trail. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't human either. There was a mechanical rhythm to it, like a breath being forced through something too small. "Probably wind through the deadfall," I said. "Let's keep moving." But Mason kept glancing over his shoulder. The sound came again, closer this time. 3 notes now, low, then higher, then low again, like something trying to mimic a call. I could feel it in my ribs, that vibration of wrongness you can't reason away, the kind that makes you think of old instincts buried deep in the spine, whispering run. We didn't. We reached the trail junction where the last camera was supposed to be. It wasn't there. Instead, the tree it had been mounted to had splintered in half, as if something huge had struck it from behind. And on the ground, half buried in the snow, were footprints. Enormous ones. But what chilled me wasn't their size. It was the spacing. The strides were too long, too deliberate, almost human, but not quite. We took photos because that's what you do when you're trying to stay rational. Evidence keeps you sane. But Mason, he started shaking. "Someone's up here," he said. "Maybe poachers," I replied, though I didn't believe it. He pointed at the prints. Poachers don't walk barefoot in the snow. The wind was picking up, visibility dropping. I knew we had to get out. We turned back, retracing our route, snow stinging our faces, and that's when Mason saw it. He froze mid-step. "Behind us," he whispered. I turned slowly. At first I saw nothing but white, then movement. Far behind us, half hidden by the snow curtain, was a shape, upright, tall, motionless. It wasn't following, it was just standing there, angled slightly toward us, as if deciding whether to come closer. "Mason," I whispered, "don't move." But he did. He raised his hand, maybe to wave, maybe to test if it was real, and the figure tilted its head. That small, almost curious motion, that's what broke me. Because it wasn't human curiosity. It was mimicry, the way a predator tilts its head after learning a new sound. Then it stepped forward. We ran. We didn't stalk. I could feel the weight of its gaze behind us, heavy, unblinking. The snow fell harder now, muting everything, even our own fear. By the time we reached camp, night had swallowed the trail. Our hands were shaking too much to light the stove. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The woods had turned strange, and silence was the only language left. I plugged in the memory card that night. The footage began to play, normal at first. Trees, light snow. Then, as Mason and I appeared on screen, hiking past the lens, something moved in the frame behind us. At first, I thought it was distortion. Then I saw the outline, tall, gaunt, almost translucent. It lingered there, half in the trees, half out, as if it had been watching us the whole time, and the timestamp on the camera? It was taken 5 minutes before we even arrived at that spot. I didn't sleep that night, not a single minute. I must have replayed that footage 50 times, frame by frame, trying to convince myself that what I saw was a trick of light, a camera glitch, something that could be explained by physics or lens distortion or anything that didn't involve that shape. But no matter how many times I froze the image, sharpened it, zoomed in, the outline stayed there, unmoving, watching. It stood between 2 lodgepole pines, its form slightly hunched, like it was too tall for the space it occupied. And though the figure was blurred by motion and snowfall, its proportions were wrong. The arms hung too low. The head seemed too narrow. Its shadows stretched in the wrong direction. Mason had gone quiet too. He was sitting across from me at the little folding table, staring at the screen with that hollow look you see in soldiers who've come home from something they can't explain. "You said this was 5 minutes before we got there?" he asked finally. I nodded. Then, what was it looking at? That question hung in the air like smoke. Because he was right. The figure wasn't facing the camera. It was angled slightly to the left, toward the spot where we would appear later in the footage. It was waiting for us. Mason stood up abruptly and stepped outside. The snow had stopped, but the forest was still whispering, those small, eerie noises trees make when the cold contracts their bark. I followed him out, the cold biting through my jacket, the moon spilling weak silver light over the clearing. Our breath clouded between us. "Could be a hoax," I said, though I didn't believe it. "Who'd come up here?" Mason muttered. "This trail's closed. No fresh tire marks at the gate. Nobody's been up this way in months." He looked back toward the trees. "Unless they didn't come through the road." We stood there for a long time, listening. It's strange how sound behaves at night. The smallest noise can feel enormous, echoing off the dark until you start to imagine the source. Somewhere far off, something cracked. A branch, maybe. But it was deliberate, rhythmic. 2 cracks, pause. Then one more. "Tree falling," I said. But Mason shook his head. "It's pacing us." That's when I noticed it too. The cracks were moving, circling, slow, deliberate. I shone my flashlight into the trees. The beam vanished into a mist of frozen air, illuminating only snow and silence. We packed our things before dawn. Neither of us spoke about it, but we didn't have to. We both wanted out. The hike down was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no distant coyote calls. Just the sound of our snowshoes pressing into the crusted ice and the occasional groan of a tree shifting under its own weight. When we reached the ranger truck, Mason turned and stared back up the ridge. "You feel like it's still watching?" I didn't answer. Because I did. Back at the station, I logged the footage into the incident report system. Standard procedure. But I hesitated before uploading it to the shared drive. Something about it felt personal, like it wasn't meant to be seen by anyone else. I kept a copy on a separate flash drive. That decision would haunt me later. For the next week, I tried to forget about it. Paperwork, patrols, maintenance calls. But the forest had changed. You start to notice things once you've been here long enough. The way deer paths shift subtly, how moss grows heavier on one side of a fallen log. But now those changes came faster, more erratic. Trees that had been upright one day were found split or twisted the next. Cameras malfunctioned, batteries drained overnight. Then came the sounds. It started as tapping on the windows of the ranger cabin, soft, slow, deliberate. Always around 2 or 3 a.m., I'd wake, flashlight in hand, step outside into the frozen dark. Nothing, not even tracks. At first, I blamed tree branches or ice. But then the tapping started to come from inside the walls. I told Mason. He laughed it off, said I was just paranoid after what we'd seen. But a few days later, he stopped showing up for morning check-ins. When I found him, he was sitting in his truck by the trailhead, pale, shaking. "There was something by my cabin last night," he said. "I heard it breathing." He described it in pieces. How he'd woken to the sound of footsteps crunching outside his window. How the handle on his door had turned, slow and steady, as if whoever was out there wasn't in a hurry. And then, just before sunrise, he heard it whisper his name. Not shout, not call, whisper. I wanted to tell him he was hearing things, that isolation does strange things to your mind, but deep down, I knew he wasn't lying. I'd been hearing something too, faint, almost like someone humming beneath their breath whenever I stepped into the woods. That night, I went back to the footage. I don't know what I was looking for, maybe proof that we hadn't gone insane. I watched every frame until dawn. At a 2:14 on the second camera, I noticed movement again. This time, the lens was facing our camp. The firelight flickered, throwing long shadows. Mason and I were asleep in our tents, and just at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by the dark, stood the same shape, tall, still, patient. But here's the part that broke me. It wasn't watching us. It was watching the camera. like it knew it was being recorded. The next morning, I went to the equipment shed to pull the rest of the memory cards from Elks Pass. Mason was supposed to meet me there. He never showed. When I drove to his cabin, the door was open, lights still on. His gear was gone, but his ranger hat sat on the kitchen counter, covered in snow. There were footprints outside, his boots leading down the path toward the creek, and next to them another set, larger, barefoot. I followed them for about a mile before they vanished near the riverbed. No blood, no signs of a struggle, just emptiness. I called it in as a missing ranger case. Search and rescue came out, did their sweep. Dogs caught a scent for a while, then lost it near a cluster of caves that had collapsed years ago. One of the rescuers, a local volunteer, told me something that stuck with me. He said, "That's where the Ute legends come from. The tall ones." They said the mountains used to echo with their voices, especially after snow. I asked him what they were supposed to be. He shrugged. Something that lives between worlds. Not quite spirit, not quite animal. They mimic what they hear. That night, I played the last trail camera clip one more time. The footage was dark, nearly black, until a sudden flash of light caught the lens, a reflection, like eyes, two pale orbs floating against the dark. Then, faintly, a whisper came through the mic. It wasn't words, just sound, low, breathy, almost curious, and beneath it, barely audible, was my name. I threw the drive into the fire, watched it twist, melt, disappear. But it didn't help. Because once you've heard your name spoken by something that shouldn't know it, the sound never really leaves you. Since then, I can't walk the trails at night anymore. Every time I step outside, I hear that same low hum beneath the wind, as if something is still pacing the edge of the forest, waiting for me to come back. And sometimes, when the radio crackles on by itself at 2 a.m., or I see movement just outside the window, I wonder if it's still out there, standing behind me in the places where the cameras can't see. I stopped reporting certain things after that week. You learn quickly as a ranger which details to leave out of your logs, strange sounds, flickering shadows, missing time. Because the Forest Service doesn't like patterns that don't make sense. They like clean, predictable entries, cause, effect, closure. But the forest doesn't work that way. Out here, closure is a myth. Everything is connected by what you don't see. After Mason disappeared, they kept me on temporary assignment. Administrative leave, they called it, until the investigation cleared. But they didn't find him. They never do. Not really. Missing people become stories out here, and stories fade into warnings. Eventually, the forest swallows even their names. Still, I couldn't leave it alone. I kept hiking back to Elks Pass. Alone. No authorization, no backup. I told myself it was to look for evidence, but deep down, I think I just needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Each time I returned, the place felt different, quieter, heavier, like the air itself had weight. Even the snow looked wrong, too smooth, like it was trying to hide what lay beneath it. The third time I went back, I followed the creek where Mason's tracks had ended. The water was low, a thin thread of ice and melt trickling over black stones. I found one of our old trail markers there, the paint nearly worn off. Behind it, a narrow opening in the hillside, half collapsed, choked with branches. A cave. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to it. It wasn't curiosity. It was something else. A pull, like gravity, but softer, deeper. I dropped to one knee, brushed away the debris. The entrance was barely wide enough for me to crawl through. Cold air breathed out from the darkness, smelling of wet stone and something else, something faintly metallic. I turned on my flashlight. The beam dissolved quickly, swallowed by the dark. The cave went deeper than I expected, curving down in a slow spiral. I hesitated only once, then I went in. The sound changed immediately. My own breathing echoed back at me, distorted, like someone else was breathing just behind me, just out of sync. Every step I took felt absorbed by the earth, as if the cave were drinking in my movement. The deeper I went, the more I felt that presence again, not seen but sensed, like the air was vibrating with attention. About 20 yards in, I found the first mark on the wall, a handprint. It was human-sized almost. But the fingers were too long, stretching unnaturally, pressed into the stone as if made when the rock was still soft. I leaned closer, tracing its outline with my gloved hand. It was warm. That's when I heard the whisper. At first, I thought it was wind through the cave mouth. Then it came again, closer this time, from deeper inside. Low, rhythmic, almost like someone trying to mimic speech without understanding it. The words didn't make sense, but the tone did. It was repeating something it had heard before. Something human. I lifted the flashlight. The beam flickered once, then steadied. The tunnel ahead widened into a chamber. The air felt electric, alive. My chest tightened as I stepped in. There were more handprints here. Dozens, maybe hundreds, covering the walls in uneven clusters. Some were small, like children's. Others reached nearly to the ceiling. But what froze me wasn't the size or number. It was that each print seemed layered, overlapping, as if they weren't marks from something, but toward something, like they were all reaching for the same point in the wall. In the center of that wall was a trail camera. Our trail camera. The casing was dented, scratched, half buried in stone dust, but it was still there, the green service tag unmistakable. The cable that should have connected it to the tree was wrapped instead around a rock, coiled like it had been placed there intentionally. I reached for it. The second my hand touched the metal, the light went out. Total darkness. Not the kind you adjust to, the kind that swallows every sense, every thought. Then came the sound. A shuffle, faint but close. And then breathing. Not echoing this time. Real, direct, the kind you can feel against your neck. I froze. The breath was slow, deliberate. One inhale, one exhale. Then, from somewhere ahead of me, a soft tapping began. The same rhythm I'd heard on the cabin walls. 2 taps. Pause. 1 tap. I backed up slowly, 1 step at a time. My hand brushed the cave wall, and I felt fingers brush mine. That broke me. I bolted. Crawled through the tunnel, scraping my knees on rock, lungs burning, the whisper following me. Closer, louder, rising until it wasn't a whisper anymore, but a chorus of half-formed words, all tangled and overlapping. When I burst back into daylight, I collapsed in the snow, gasping. The forest was silent again. I looked back at the cave. The entrance was gone. No, not gone. Covered, as if the hill had folded in on itself. I didn't go back to the station right away. I drove. Kept driving until I hit the first town with lights. I sat in my truck until morning, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. But the longer I stared at the windshield, the more I saw my reflection shift, not visibly, but subtly. The way my outline seemed to shimmer at the edges, as if something was standing behind me. When I finally returned, my supervisor called me in. They'd reviewed my reports, my GPS logs. They said my timestamps didn't add up. According to their records, I'd been gone 3 days, not 1. I told them that couldn't be right. I showed them my watch, my notes. Everything said the same thing. I'd only been out there for a single night. But when I checked the truck's dashboard clock, it agreed with them. 3 days missing. That night, I tried to sleep, but dreams came instead. Not like normal dreams. They felt real, tactile. I was back in the cave. The whispering was louder, but now I could almost make out words. It was saying my name again. And then another voice joined it. Mason's. He was saying something else, something like, "Don't look behind you." I woke up drenched in sweat, my window open though I'd locked it the night before. Snow was falling outside, but on the sill were footprints. Bare. Human. I told myself it was hallucination, exhaustion, trauma. The mind filling in blanks it couldn't process. But when I looked closer, I saw something caught in the snow. A small piece of plastic. A fragment of a trail camera casing. And scratched into its surface, faint but unmistakable, were 3 letters. M-A-S, Mason. I should have left then. Transferred, resigned, done anything to get out. But I didn't, because whatever was happening wasn't done with me yet. And deep down, part of me still wanted to understand what it was, or who it was, that the forest had been hiding all this time. Because maybe it wasn't a thing at all. Maybe it was something the forest used, a reflection, a voice, a memory, something that could wear a person's fear the way we wear uniforms. And I'd already given it mine. I stopped marking the days after that. Sunrise and sunset felt the same. Thin light filtered through trees that seemed to lean closer each morning, as if they were listening for what I'd brought back from the cave. Sleep was a rumor. When I closed my eyes, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. Sometimes it came from the walls, sometimes from the radio, static shaped like words, whispering just beyond comprehension. I started unplugging the radios, taking the batteries out, but the voices didn't stop. They simply moved closer. The Forest Service sent a replacement ranger to assist with ongoing recovery efforts. Her name was Harper. Young, efficient, still believed the woods could be managed if you wrote the right report. She asked about Mason on her first day. "Still missing," I said. "Don't expect him back." She gave me that polite half-smile people use when they think you're exaggerating. That afternoon, we checked the lower trails together. The snow had started to thaw, leaving veins of mud that reflected the sky in fragments. Halfway through the hike, Harper stopped. "You hear that?" she asked. At first, I didn't. Then I caught it. The same three-note whistle that Mason and I had heard up on Elk's Pass. Low, high, low, faint, almost playful. I told her it was wind. She nodded, but I could see the doubt flicker in her eyes. Back at the cabin, she went to shower. I sat at the table, staring at the fogged window. When she came out, her expression was pale. "Someone's been in your storage closet," she said. I followed her in. The door was open, snow tracked across the floor. On the workbench lay a new trail camera, its red light blinking, recording. I hadn't turned it on. I picked it up. The screen glowed for a second, then played back what it had just filmed. The two of us standing there, frozen. And behind us, between the coats hanging on the wall, something tall. Still. Harper whispered, "That's not possible." The feed cut to static. She wanted to leave that night. I told her we'd wait till morning, thus drive together to headquarters. She agreed, but I could tell she wouldn't sleep. Neither would I. Around midnight, the generator sputtered and died. The cabin sank into silence. Then came the tapping. Not on the window this time, on the door. Slow, deliberate. 2 knocks. Pause. 1 knock. Harper reached for her flashlight, but I grabbed her wrist. "Don't answer it," I said. The knocking stopped. A minute later, a voice came through the wood. My voice. "Harper, it's me. Let me in." She looked at me, at the real me, sitting beside her, her face drained of color. The voice outside repeated, softer now, pleading. "It's cold. Please." I whispered, "Don't move." The doorknob turned once, twice, then slowly returned to stillness. After that, nothing. We waited until dawn before opening the door. No footprints, no wind, just the endless white silence of the forest staring back at us. Harper left that morning, drove straight to Durango and filed for reassignment. I can't blame her. I stayed, because by then, leaving felt pointless. Whatever had followed me out of that cave wasn't bound to the forest anymore. It had learned my voice, my habits, my name. Wherever I went, it would go too. Days passed. The snow melted into mud. The birds returned, but their songs were wrong, off-key, like they were copying something that didn't understand rhythm. Every sound felt rehearsed, even the wind. One evening, I took the truck back toward Elk's Pass. I told myself I'd burn the whole stretch, pull every camera, close every trail, end it for good. But when I reached the ridge, the forest felt alive in a way I can't describe. The air hummed, my skin prickled. And then I heard Mason. His voice came from somewhere ahead, faint through the trees. "Over here," he called. Calm, familiar. Exactly the way he used to sound before everything went wrong. I should have run. Instead, I followed. He led me to the same creek, is just the same spot where his tracks had ended. The snow was gone now, but the ground was damp, dark. "Mason," I said, "where are you?" He stepped out from behind a pine, or rather, something wearing Mason's shape did. At first glance, he looked normal, same uniform, same tired eyes, but the longer I stared, the more the details drifted. His mouth didn't quite match his words. His breathing was off, delayed by a heartbeat. His pupils reflected too much light. "I've been waiting," he said, voice flat, perfect. "You shouldn't have left." I took a step back. The air between us felt thick, humming like the inside of a power line. "What are you?" I whispered. It smiled, a slow, uncertain imitation of one. "You know." Behind him, the forest moved. The trees seemed to shift, their shadows merging until the space around him blurred. Faces flickered in the trunks, mine, Harper's, Mason's again, dozens of half-formed copies watching through bark and snow. He tilted his head, that same mimicry I'd seen months ago on the ridge. "Do you hear it?" he asked. "Hear what?" "The recording." And then I heard it. The soft click of a camera shutter, again and again, coming from all directions. Every tree, every shadow, every surface flashing for an instant like an invisible strobe. Each flash captured a still image of us, of me. I realized the forest wasn't alive. It was remembering. Every step, every sound, every word I'd ever spoken here. It had been collecting them, replaying them, building something out of the noise and fear and repetition. I stumbled backward. "Why me?" Mason, or the thing pretending to be him, took a step closer. "Because you listened." The world tilted. The sound swelled. 1,000 whispers merging into one continuous voice that filled the valley. Not angry, not cruel, just endless, curious, hungry for echo. I ran. I don't know how long. When I finally collapsed near the truck, the forest had gone completely silent again. No wind, no birds. Even my heartbeat sounded muffled. I looked back once. The ridge was empty. Whatever had been there didn't chase me. It didn't have to. It had my image now, my voice, my name. It could find me anywhere. I drove until the fuel gauge hit empty, parked by the highway and waited for sunrise. When the light came, the forest looked normal again. Innocent, even. I filed my resignation that week. They accepted it without question. Official reason: psychological stress following search and rescue incident. Now I live 3 states away, flat country, no trees high enough to cast real shadows. But some nights when the wind shifts through the power lines, I hear that low 3-note whistle. Sometimes the phone rings and there's only static on the line until the static starts to breathe. I tell myself it's memory, not haunting, just the forest replaying what it learned. But deep down, I know the truth. The cameras never stopped recording. They just changed where they aim. And when I pass a mirror or the dark window of a parked car, sometimes I catch a reflection that's half a second late. It tilts its head the way Mason did, the way I do now without realizing. The thing in the forest didn't take our lives. It took our timing, stole the space between cause and effect, replaced it with itself. That's why I don't go hiking anymore. Not because I'm afraid of getting lost, but because somewhere out there, in that endless maze of trees and silence, something is still walking the trails, wearing my face, waiting for the next person who dares to listen too closely. And when the cameras click, when the red lights blink in the dark, when you feel the air shift behind you and hear a voice that sounds almost like your own, don't turn around. Because whatever's standing there isn't recording you. It's waiting for you to become part of the recording. You've been listening to No Name, where every shadow has a story. If this one followed you into the dark, let us know in the comments what you think it really was, and whether you dare to go camping again after hearing this. Don't forget to subscribe and keep the fire burning, because out here, the next story might already be watching you.